This is a D6 Generation Pip. Bite-sized content for a busy gamer. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ.
Hey, what about me?
Oh yeah, and sometimes featuring Rafe, Hollywood Granger.
D6G Hot Take.
Well, here we are again with another pip. This one, again, not really a hot take. That whole hot take thing kind of fell by the wayside, to be honest. Although the approach to my topic of conversation tonight is going to be a bit of a hot take. When I committed to making some more content for the D6 generation, I really didn't want to do solo stuff for a variety of reasons. And I was really hoping I wasn't going to be doing solo stuff today. And yet here I am. Here we are. And I'm by myself. Tonight's D&D session had to get canceled for some last-minute business arrangements that fell awry. And I thought, well, I will definitely get a few of these other guys on board to do a review of a game we've been enjoying. Sadly, everybody very quickly made alternative plans, and here I am. But it does make a certain amount of sense, because what we are going to be discussing in what I was really hoping was going to be an old-fashioned D6G game review, sadly, that fell through. I'm a poet, and I'm not even going to finish that statement. I want to review the game Rangers of Shadowdeep by Joseph A. McCullough. And ironically enough, or fittingly, actually, it's not ironic at all, Rangers is a game that can, in fact, may very well be at some of its strongest when it is played as a solo game. So I will be approaching this from that point of view. So Rangers of Shadowdeep, it's been out for a while. It first launched in 2019, and it is a self-publication by Joseph McCullough. So with the help of Modifius Entertainment, who published the hardcover book in Lithuania, interestingly enough, and a deck of cards that is thematically designed to go with the game, all of the supplements, including the rule books, can also be purchased on Drive-Thru RPG as print-on-demand or digital-only products. And it was Joe's first foray into self-publishing, which is something that he really wanted to look into. And so in 2019, actually, yeah, it had to be 2019 or very early 2020, I played my first game of Rangers of Shadowdeep with old Andy and Dave from the Nerd Herders podcast, and Dave, of course, was in Russ's D&D campaign in its very earliest phases, and Rafe was there also, and we played the first mission from the original rulebook called The Missing, and I had a blast, had a really good time. Actually, we played missions in Rangers, and I'm going to try to keep this straight, but I am probably going to mess it up on multiple occasions. The game breaks down into missions, which are a series of connected scenarios. So the scenario is the smaller version, and the mission is a string of these outings or these games that are thematically tied together in one of several different ways, or multiple ways, really. And so the very first mission in the rule book is called The Missing. And it's a great mission to get started with the game, to get people interested because it's fun. It shows a bunch of different strengths of the game. Great opportunities for terrain if you enjoy making the boards as I do. And it's a really cool kind of way to immerse yourself into the world of Rangers of Shadowdeep, as well as sort of a launching point for new characters, because it could be a different village every time. So, but before we talk about The Missing and the other missions that you can get out of the new rule book, which is called Rangers of Shadowdeep, the Standard Edition, which has a publishing date of it doesn't actually say. You'd think I would look that up ahead of time. This is it's a republishing, so it's got to be after 2020, might even be 2021. Anyway, so first, let's talk about the rules. What is the Rangers of Shadowdeep all about? Well, Rangers of Shadowdeep is a really interesting take on Joe McCullough's basic game engine. So if you're familiar with Frostgrave or Stargrave or Ghost Archipelago, or I think Silver Bayonet, they're all very similar, although I haven't looked at Silver Bayonet, I'll admit. But I believe they all go with the same general game engine. That game engine revolves around models, of course, and those models have a series of stats. We actually did a review of Frostgrave many years ago when it first came out. So let's see. First, there is, you know what? I realized that because I'm all by myself, I can totally do this. And I'm back, and it's episode 176, apparently. Episode 175. See, I did that, and I screwed it up. That's impressive. D6G, episode 175. We did travel games and a detailed review of Frostgrave. So if you want a little more splash and flash and a little more Russ and whatnot, then you could and Terrace actually joined us for that review. So you'd get a lot more Terrace and you'd get more Russ, 100% more Russ and Terrace, actually, if you want to go and look at that. But anyway, back to the game. The game revolves around models, and the models have very few stats. It's a very pared down rules set. It's very simple, very elegant. Models have a move stat, and that's going to be how many inches they move. And they are always going to be able to, well, not always, but usually they'll take two actions, one of which has to be a move action. And that first move action, whether it's taken as their first action or their second action, will always be that full inch amount of inches of movement. The average is 6 inches. Then they have a fight and a shoot stat. The game completely revolves around D20s. And so the fight and the shoot stat are bonuses to your D20. So if your fight is 2, then that means you're going to roll D20 plus 2 when you're fighting. And shooting, you're going to roll D20 plus your shooting stat, whether that's a 1 or a 2 or a 0. And that'll be your success or failure when you're shooting. Then you have armor. Armor is the minimum they have to roll to wound you. So if your armor is 10, even if they beat you with, like, they roll an 8 and you roll a 7, they beat you, but they can't wound you. They have their successful attack roll has to be above your armor. So when I talk about fighting, your armor will be a little clearer. Then you have a will stat, which is basically anytime you might be afraid or you have to overpower somebody's attempt to mesmerize you or something along those lines, willpower is basically what we're talking about. That's going to be a d20 against a specific target number, and your will stat will be added to that. And then you have health, and your health is how many hit points you lose before you go out of the game. And then if you're playing in a campaign and in any of these systems, why wouldn't you be? Then you're then going to roll on a typical injury table and see if you survive, or if you got a permanent injury, or the good old standby, you survived but somebody stole all your stuff. So those are your stats. Your stats are move, fight and shoot, armor, will, and health. And the whole game's going to revolve around that. It's going to revolve around those D20 rolls. So let's look at a phase of Rangers of Shadowdeep. So you're as an intrepid ranger, and we're going to look at this as a solo game, because I'm solo, in case I hadn't mentioned it. You've got your ranger, and your ranger is your main character. It's you on the table, basically. And you have a collection of companions who are a variety of fantasy tropes. You could have wizards, you could have fighters, you could have archers, you could have thieves, you could have clerics, healers, and they're going to be joining you. And you are going to be going on these missions, and these missions are, or these scenarios that build into missions, are going to have a set of monsters that will be coming at you. You're going to be exploring and investigating things. You're going to be trying to solve mysteries as you're doing this. So there will be different places on the table marked by little investigation markers or mystery markers that you'll have to visit and take different tests. And as you're doing that, there will be monsters coming at you. Your job may just be to kill the monsters. It may just be to survive for a certain amount of time before help arrives. It might be to clear all of the investigation markers so that you know what's going on in this particular location. Okay, so the game it goes in a series of turns, and in those turns there are 4 phases. So in the first phase is the ranger phase, where you get to activate your ranger and a certain number of companions that are with you. Okay, so you can activate your ranger and 2 companions if you're playing solo, or you can activate your ranger and 1 companion if there are 2 players running rangers in the same game. The game is either solo or it's co-op, which I love. I really enjoy it. It kind of takes away, I mean, sometimes you want to beat the crap out of your friends, but sometimes you want to, join shoulder to shoulder and fight evil or whatnot. I say that a lot, I'm realizing now, only now after all these years and whatnot. But anyway, now you'll hear it over and over again, and I will be trying not to say it again. Which of us will succeed? My money's on you. But anyway, so you get to activate your ranger and up to 1 companion if there's 2 of you playing, or 2 if there's no one else playing, you're playing solo. Otherwise, if there's 3 or 4 players, you're only activating your companion. I mean, your ranger. There is a special thing that you can do if you're activating companions as well as your rangers. You can do a group activation if the companion or companions you are activating are within 3 inches of your ranger. So under normal circumstances, you can still activate your companions no matter how far away they are in the ranger phase, if you're allowed to do that. But you're not going to be able to do this group activation unless they're close by. So it represents you coordinating your efforts in combat. And basically, a group activation means you all take a move action and then you all do a second action. And the theory there being you can mob a powerful enemy and get multiple attacks on them with bonuses for outnumbering before the monster can get a chance to attack. So once your ranger has gone and some of the companions, it is then the creature phase or the monster phase. And so there's a very simple AI that's included, that's been included really since the beginning, since Frostgrave. But here in Rangers of Shadowdeep, it's running all of the opponents. So there isn't any infighting amongst the rangers. It's all of the rangers against the monsters, and the monsters are all run by this AI. And so what that means is that you have to basically plan around the fact that there are going to be some companions that aren't going to get to activate before the monsters activate. So your rangers will get to go, and maybe some of your companions, but the rest of them are going to go after the monsters. So the monsters are going to activate using the AI, which I'll talk about later. Okay, once all of the monsters activate, and they activate in the descending number of hit points. So the most powerful monsters are going to activate first. Generally speaking, you can really be a stickler on that and randomly determine amongst monsters who all have the same number of hit points which one goes. I've done that a couple times. I did that with my initial game with Dave a few weeks ago. And it really just kind of bogged down until eventually we just said, like, these guys are just going to go. We're just going to do them in order across the table, unless they're close to other monsters that are going to have an impact on like who goes at what in what order. Once all of the monsters have gone, it's then the companion phase. So remaining companions that have not activated get to activate. And then it wraps up with the event phase, which usually means either something special is happening dictated by the scenario, or you're going to draw encounter cards or scenario cards or both that are going to dictate some event that's going to happen, or more monsters are going to show up. And this is really where the replayability is going to come in. Even if you know that, oh, there's 2 cards that are going to be 2 zombies, and there's 2 cards that are going to be 1 zombie, and there's one card's going to be a troll, you never really know when in that playthrough of the scenario they're going to show up. So you're really talking about a different game every time you play, which is great. Okay. And so that's the turn order. The turn order is very simple, very basic. And the activations that you can get are also very simple and very basic. So you're going to get a move action. Okay. And you can always take 2 move actions if you're at a point in the game where you really want to get to one point to another faster. You take your 1 move action with your regular move, and then you can take an additional move action for half of your regular move stat. So if you have 6-inch move, you can sprint in 1 activation for 9 inches, basically. And that's pretty fast. Most of these games are played on 3-foot by 3-foot tables or smaller. Many of them are played on a smaller table. There's a lot of claustrophobic scenarios where you're indoors. There's the new standard rule edition comes with an amazing array of missions. Actually, it comes with 4 full missions with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, a crazy number of scenarios actually, and 2 of them feature mostly indoor scenarios, indoor environments. You're in one, you're attacking a watchtower and you're working your way up inside the watchtower, and then the ultimate fight is at the top of the watchtower. And in the other, you're actually attacking a convent that has fallen to the Shadowdeep, and you're looking for a holy artifact that was left behind when the priestesses fled the convent. So, and that's all interior. And so there's a lot of different environments that you can play. And you may be running and you need to get from one point to another really quickly, and you can do that. When monsters do that, they can make some real, like, fast monsters. Let's say a bloodbat, right? A bloodbat has a speed of it's almost as if I'm stalling, a speed of 8, right? So that means a bloodbat that sees you and can't get to you this turn is going to be moving 12 inches towards you. And as you may expect, blood bats are often encountered inside scary places. So on these smaller 1 by 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot, or 2 foot by 2 foot, or 2.5 by 2.5. I think that's the biggest these interior settings get. And as I scan through all of the monsters, wolf also goes 8. Looks like those are the fastest. I have reason to know from personal experience that trolls, because they only move 4 inches, thank God they only move 4 inches, and yet 4 inches is plenty because they get on you eventually anyway. All right. So some of the other activations some of the other actions that you could do, you can attack using your fight stat if you're in base to base. So you don't get an automatic fight by going into base to base with an enemy. You have to actually take an action. So if you can get there in one move, you're good to go, then you're going to get to fight. However, if you can't get there in one move, but you want to get into contact, you're going to have to use that second half distance move, and you're not going to have the ability to fight that turn. Although if you're the ranger, you get in there, the monster's going to fight you, and there is no benefit for initiating the combat. A combat is always an opposed roll between the two models that are fighting. And even if there's more than one model, enemy model in base to base with you, the attack is always going to be directed at one model. There are bonuses +2 for each model that's outnumbering you, or that you outnumber the enemy. But every combat is always one model on one model, and an opposed die roll. And remember that the winner has to also break above the target's armor for you to do any damage. And so because it's a D20, the one of the charges against the game, when people are talking about the game in a way that, like, sometimes they find something problematic, the fact that it might be swingy because it's a D20, but what usually mitigates that is the fact that you can stack these bonuses by mobbing a model if you've got the opportunity, by having models that are great at fighting. So their fight stat, once your fight stat gets into +3, +4, +5, then the die rolling becomes a lot less dependent upon pure luck, and you're really wanting to put your really strong fighters against weaker fighters, or to mob the stronger fighters. So you've got those bonuses. Might I recommend a raptor as a companion, because you've got these crows or hawks or eagles flying around guarding you. I know a crow is not a raptor, but bear with me. And they're very difficult to hit in combat, and yet at the same time they're going to still give you that +2. So they're really beneficial when you're trying to stack, like I said, stack those modifiers for against a stronger opponent. And so you can fight, you could shoot if you have a missile weapon, and you're rangers. So why wouldn't you? Even if you've built yourself as a massive tank, you can still find room somewhere for a bow and a quiver. And so you can shoot. I particularly enjoy the concept of the shooting in this game, because you use your shoot stat, but your target uses their fight stat. So they're basically trying to dodge you. And again, you want to have as many bonuses. It's a lot more difficult to stack bonuses for a shoot. You really just kind of have to dedicate your character's advancement to shooting for a while before you can get up into the or have find a lucky magic item, like a bow that gives you a plus in combat, or arrows. I did squander a +3 arrow the other day against a Knoll. I think it was a Knoll Sergeant, and the Knoll Sergeant had already really knocked on one of my companions, and I thought, this is the time, this is going to be great, and I rolled a 2, which is okay, because then I had a special ability called the Hand of Fate, which allowed me to re-roll one die, so I re-rolled it, and I think I got a 1. So yeah, there goes that magic arrow. So magic bows, way better than magic arrows in my personal opinion, if you had to choose, which generally you don't, because the treasure is usually random. So in addition to shooting and fighting, you have heroic abilities that usually don't take an action. They're just something that you can trigger once per game. And you have spells. So your ranger's not really just your average run-of-the-mill, you're not just Aragorn. You're not Strider roaming around. You can actually build a ranger to be almost anything you can imagine in a fantasy milieu, if you will. For instance, when we were playing 2 weeks ago, I played with Russ and John. Russ was very intrigued and wanted to create one of his D&D characters that's a gnome named I'm going to forget, and I'm not going to remember where I put all of those models. Those up there they are, but am I going to be able to read it? Namfoodle. Is his name Namfoodle, Russ? Is that really the character's name? I think it is. I think it is Namfoodle. These are all this is Navarre. Namfoodle. There it is. I should have had more faith in myself. And Namfoodle is a gnome in D&D and has he's not really a fighter. He's certainly not a ranger. And yet Russ was very pleased with the range of skills and spells that he could put together. Quite often the spells aren't necessarily as magic-y as you would think a spell would be. They're sort of a catch-all phrase for a lot of different things that you could do. And so Russ was very intrigued that he could recreate Namfoodle as a ranger. He liked that. And it gives you a lot of these spell abilities. There's a lot of, direct attack spells, direct damage spells like magic missile spells, fireball spells. There's also healing. There's also turning undead. There's hold creature. There's spider climb, but it's insect climb. That sort of thing. So you can do lots of different things with these spells. And then in addition to that, the scenario is going to give you different options also. For instance, the second scenario of the missing mission is the infected trees. So you've basically you've hunted down these creatures to their forest lair, and in the process you come across multiple. It's a lot like Mirkwood, and there's a lot of just random bodies wrapped in spider silk cocoons just laying around. And so as an action, you can tear that open, and there's a test to see what's inside, and could be something good, could be something bad. That's just it. You don't know. So there's all kinds of different things that are specific to the scenario that would also dictate what's going to happen to you. And then the rules are, there's rules for forcing combat. If you go within 1 inch of a model, they have the option of snapping to you, and so then you're in base-to-base contact. Monsters will always do it, so you can use that to your advantage to get them to move in a certain direction. You can get them to engage a model you want them to fight more than another, like if you're trying to protect one of your less tanky companions. For instance, if you've got a healer and they're getting close, and the next time they activate, they're going to charge your healer. You can go around, you get within 1 inch of them, they snap to whoever got within 1 inch of them. You as a player can choose whether or not to snap. If a monster doesn't quite make it to you, you can snap to them, or you can not snap to them. It's up to you. There's very simple rules for jumping, for falling. Swimming is not something I would recommend, especially if you are wearing armor. Swimming is it's a skill that you there's 18 skills total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 skills. 15 skills total. They're just a variety of different things that as a ranger you'd want to be good at. Everything from acrobatics to traps. Everything from perception to pick locks. And swim is one of them. So your swim test is a D20 roll plus your swim stat, and then minus a whole bunch of things depending on what you're wearing. For instance, if you have light armor, your die roll is going to be -2. If you've got heavy armor on, it's going to be -5. If you're carrying a shield, it's -1. If you've got treasure you're holding, it's -2. So basically it's a target number 5 test, but your die is going to be really weighted down, no pun intended, with the armor that you're carrying and the other things that you're carrying. Because this is so reminiscent of a role-playing game, we always allow you to do things like if you're really nervous. So, for instance, I went over to Joe's house this weekend, and we played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 scenarios. It was great. It was awesome. We just played a bunch of, or maybe it was 5. I think it was 5. We did The Missing, and then we did Descent into Darkness. Yeah, so it was 5. And in the middle of Descent into Darkness is great. First, you have to fight your way down this escarpment into the Shadowdeep, and that drops you into a swamp. You have to get out of the swamp and fight your way onto dry land, and then as you work your way through the Shadowdeep, you stumble upon an old building, because the Shadowdeep, basically, I'll talk about the fluff in a minute, but the Shadowdeep is this just awful darkness that engulfs the land and kind of just all of a sudden lurches forward and expands its territory, covering entire kingdoms at a time. And so your friendly neighborhood king, you're from the kingdom of Alador as a ranger, and the friendly neighborhood kingdom, of see, this is where somebody would either be telling me, don't worry, it's not that big a deal, or they would have this information already, right? There's Alador. You're from Alador, and none of the little call-outs are calling to me and letting me know what the other kingdom is, which is very sad. And I kind of remember that I could look in a mission, but every call-out box that I'm looking at is just talking about Alador, because that's where you're from. Anyway, there's this place known as Larenthia. See, I've got to remember that I've got this versatility now. So Larenthia, the entire kingdom of Larenthia, has been absorbed by the Shadowdeep, and that's what you're trying to do in the Descent into Darkness mission, is to find any survivors. And so then you get mobbed, because now you're in the Shadowdeep, and all the bad guys know you've come in, and they're mobbing you. And in the center mission, you're down off of the escarpment, and you haven't found the ruined settlement yet. It actually literally drops you off in a swamp in deep water, and you have to swim onto the board before you drown. And Joe and John both, interestingly enough. So if you're familiar with the Roleplay 8 Charisma gang, it may not surprise you that Joe and John created almost identical characters, except that Joe has even fewer abilities and spells to assist other people. It's just, he's like 100% a tank. And so it's all survivability for him. And so both of them, the heavy armor, they've got the shield, and Joe got dumped into the heavy water, the deep water, and he almost drowned. And so the swimming, if you looked at the thing, you've got a target number of 5, but your die roll is -6. So 11 or less, and you're taking damage, and you take damage equal to the number that you failed by. So if you roll a 1, you're losing, 10 points, and you've only got 18 to start with. So swimming can be important. Very rarely, but when it is, it's very important, like in real life, really. Went over hand-to-hand combat, went over ranged combat. It's all very, very simple. And over the course of the game, you can get different conditions. You get bitten by a giant spider, you could be poisoned. You get attacked by a giant fly, you could get diseased. You can suffer from hunger and thirst, which is really kind of brutal. And that's usually in one of these long missions that has multiple scenarios far away from resupply, and your models start to lose their abilities and lose hit points and things like that. So very briefly, the evil creature AI. It's very simple. Is the creature in combat? If it is, it fights. If it isn't, then you go to item 2. Item 2, is there a hero in line of sight? If there is, and it has and it's in range and has a ranged weapon, it'll shoot. If it does not have a ranged weapon, or it's not in range, it will move its full move towards the closest good guy, quote unquote, and then it'll check again. If it checks again and it's in range, it'll shoot. If it gets into combat with that move, it'll fight. If it doesn't, it'll move again with that the halved move stat. And then if it's not, you go to step 3. Step 3, if it doesn't have an enemy hero in sight, then you go to the step 3. Does the scenario have a target point? Most of the scenarios have a target point that the monster, sort of the goal the monsters have and where they're headed, and they'll move in that direction. Their regular move, and then you check again to see if they have line of sight. If they do, they'll then act accordingly. If they don't, then they don't move. So if they don't see anybody, they're not going to be moving that move and a half speed. And if there is no target point, then they move randomly. And we have had some missions where there wasn't a target point and the monsters come on in the corners and they just roll badly and just keep bouncing into the corner, which, is ideal really when you're trying to, not fight any more monsters than absolutely necessary. And so that's the game really. And the world is fairly basic. It's a really nice fantasy world, with multiple kingdoms. You've got the kingdom of Alador. You've got the kingdom of Larenthia that has now disappeared. And Alador has a young king. His father has died under mysterious circumstances. Nobody really knows how the Shadowdeep spreads. And the Rangers, who used to be kind of like Texas Rangers, kind of like Strider and the Dunedain, they've all been withdrawn, called back to the capital, and the king has sort of repurposed them as investigators and trackers. You need to go out to the borderlands and help the people pull back into a more fortified position. You have to go into the Shadowdeep, try to figure out what the Shadowdeep is all about. Is there any way you can stop the Shadowdeep from absorbing Alador? Because, Larenthia presumably did everything they could to stop it, and that didn't work. So there's sort of like a fateful, doomed feeling about the whole setting, and it's great because you have such leeway in designing your ranger. You have the ability to recreate almost any character or any type of character or character class that you want. If you think about it as a ranger / fill in the blank multi-class, it's really not too far off the mark. And as you go, of course, you're going to gain experience. And so far I've done the missing mission 3 times in the last few weeks, with 3 different groups of people. It's been different every time. And one time we got just enough experience to level up. For the first 5 levels, you're leveling up every 100 experience. Then it goes to 200, and then it goes up from there. In fact, I have it right here. It actually goes up to 150. So 1 through 5 is 100. 6 through 10 is 150. 11 through 15 is 200, so on and so forth. And you get bonuses every time you go up. And so you're going to go up once for the first 5 missions or more, or scenarios or more. You're going to go up pretty much every other mission unless you're really lucky. And you get to improve your skills. You get to add to 5 different skills, or you can add up to 2 points to the same skill. And so you're getting those bonuses. So on those D20 rolls, those numbers are a little easier to bump up quicker. And you can do that also. You can add to those in your build when you're building your ranger to start with. When you're building your ranger to start with, you are going to be able to bump up 3 of your basic stats. So not armor, but move, fight, shoot, will, and health. You're going to be able to choose up to 5 heroic abilities and or spells in any combination. And you're going to be able to add to your skills up to 5, and you get 8 points to bump up every time you spend one of those points. So you could really be a very skilled but not so great at fighting, not so great at magic kind of ranger. So you improve skills, and you go to second level, you improve one of those stats goes up by 1, and you third level, you add recruitment points. So that's how many points you can spend on companions. Everybody starts with 100, although the more rangers that are present, the far fewer companions they will have with them, and the fewer points they're allowed to spend. So it's a relatively simple calculus when you're looking at if you're playing solo, like I'm solo now, ding, drink, you get your base recruitment points, and your max number of companions is 7. If there are 2 players, you get 50% minus 10, so you get 40% of your recruitment points, and your max number is 3. If there are 3 players, you get 30%, so 30, and your max companions are 2. And if there's 4 of you, you only get 10%, and your max companions is 1. So if you got to 3rd level, then and there were 4 of you, you would get to spend 11 points, which is impossible because they all break down into 5s groups, like 5, 10, 15, 20, so on and so forth. So that's basically the rundown. And of course, your survival table, if you survive, you roll a d20, and on a 1 or a 2, you're dead, which doesn't happen very often, but happened to me twice on that day that I played with Joe. I lost the Huff, my beloved honey badger, and Too Slow, my not so beloved rogue, who really deserved to die because he was really too slow. 3 or 4 is a permanent injury, and then you roll on this permanent injury chart, which has pretty much remained constant since Frostgrave. You could lose toes, you could lose fingers, you could hurt your leg, you could hurt your arm, you could take a body blow, you could have psychological scars. And all of those are really only going to knock a stat down by 1, or your movement down by half an inch, and or so on and so forth. And so they're not going to really make you completely unusable, but you will be having some negative. But that's only on a 2 or a 3. On a 3 or a 4. On a 5 or a 6, you're badly wounded, so that you are going to be minus 5 hit points in your next scenario, which could be bad. On a 7 or 8, it's that standard, miniatures game campaign close call where you escape, but they get all your cool stuff. And on a 9 or better, it's a full recovery. So your chances are very good that you're going to make a full recovery. And that is Rangers of Shadowdeep in a nutshell. And so now I would love to pass on to Russ or almost anyone explain the D6 generation game rating system. Unfortunately, it's all me. And weighted down as I have been with all of the time and effort of holding this whole thing together, I don't know if I can. You know what? In the mode of a ranger, wandering the land and tired, exhausted from protecting the innocent and fighting evil, I will explain to you the D6 generation patent pending gaming rating system. Well, my friend, we meet again in this quiet, dank, out-of-the-way tavern. How do I rate the enemies of the Underdeep, the Shadowdeep, as most everyone else calls it? I call it the Underdeep because I spend a lot of time underground, in the Underdeep, but anyway. Well, it's not unlike how I rate the ale in these 2-bit backwood taverns. I say, if it's a really, really, really good ale, I would say my friends would enjoy this ale on a D6 roll of 1 or better. Everybody's going to like this ale. Or I say, it's a middling to fair ale. I would give it a 4+. Meaning, every time one of my friends comes and tries this ale, they're going to roll a die, whether it be I guess you could roll a D20, really, and it would be a 10+, but I don't want to dilute the D6 generation patent pending system. So, on a 4+, so 50% of my friends who drink this ale would enjoy this ale. So, the lower the number, the more likely a gamer would be to enjoy this game. And to completely break math, I will say with a reroll would count as a half, really. So if I were to say a 4+ with a reroll, it would mean that 4.5, 3.5 out of 5. Oh, now see, the math has broken me. It's just, think of it as stars, but the lower the better, really. Why did you even make me do this? I would rather go out and fight 100 gnolls than 1 zombie troll. Speaking of that, did I ever tell you about the time I fought 100 gnolls and a zombie troll? Well, let me tell you. Well, there you go. That's the patent-pending D6G game rating system. How much would an average gamer like this game on a D6 roll? Their likelihood on a D6 roll, that die roll plus whatever. So a 4+ would mean like 50% of gamers would like this game. So how would I rate Rangers of Shadowdeep? I would say gamers in general, I would say a 3+, and I'll tell you why. A 3+ because it does have that very I won't say swingy, because I don't think it's swingy per se, because there are ways to mitigate the luck, but luck is definitely a factor, and that is built in. It's a feature rather than a bug. So if that, there are many gamers who don't like that. They want skill and skill alone to be the deciding factor. And so those gamers aren't really probably going to enjoy Shadows as much as, let's say, a role player. A role player looking for a miniatures game is going to love this game. And so I'm going to say your average straight-up gamer is going to be at a 3+. I'm going to say a role player looking for a miniatures game is going to be at a 2+. And I'm going to say a story-driven, not a power-gamey role player, a story-driven role-playing gamer who's looking for a miniatures game that maybe like already likes miniatures games, but is looking for a miniatures game to really scratch the role-playing itch, let's say. That guy or gal is gonna like it on a 2+ with a reroll. So I would say that all averages together to a 2+, because I'm bad at math. I really like it. I love it. And we will have Joe McCullough on the show for a segment, a pip, sooner rather than later. And that's all I've got to say about Shadowdeep, Rangers of, 1 each. So I hope you all have a good night. I'm very happy that I was able to spend the evening talking about gaming if I wasn't able to play. And those other guys can suck eggs. Till next time, good night. And before I go, actually, please check out my website at thegallantscribe.com. And you can check out what I've been writing, what I've been doing, links to my books, and hopefully an updated blog post or two every now and then. I'm also toying with the idea of doing a little narration of Shadowdeep games as I go. Also, you can check me out at D6G Craig on Twitter. There are lots of pictures of my recent games of Rangers of Shadowdeep on my Twitter timeline. And you can also look at either of those places for more information on my tour of Gettysburg for 2023. If you're interested in joining me for that, gaming and Gettysburg, how could you go wrong? And yes, I'm looking to get us some keppies. So you can check that out too. Anyway, thank you for listening, especially for sticking out here till the bitter end. And now, for real, good night.
And that was the D6G Hot Take.
Was it really, though?
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@the d6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.